Hey everybody, welcome back to Around the Campfire. I'm here today with Sydney Shimko, our website accessibility expert at Northwoods and recent author of a widely read blog article, right, Sydney? This thing's gone viral on accessibility. And we have talked about lots of stuff around accessibility. We've been practicing in this area for multiple years, 5, 6 years now. Huge focus over there. And today's topic, we're going to narrow in on PDFs. There's a lot to talk about with accessibility, but we want to spend 5, 10 minutes today just hitting the highlights, what was in the blog article, and laying the groundwork for you, somebody who's tuned in over here. And we assume that the audience for today's podcast is people that are aware that they have an accessibility problem, specifically around PDF files, that you have been told by probably somebody higher up in your organization, or maybe you're that higher up person that realizes that there's a deadline now for getting all your PDFs remediated. This has been affecting government organizations, specifically universities, schools, nonprofits. And they had a deadline of April. And then, surprise, surprise, that deadline was extended to next April. So everybody has a reprieve. And the reason it was extended was because nobody was ready. And I'm sure everybody's absolutely getting ready for this new thing, he says sarcastically. No, there's clearly a problem. And one of the issues is that this takes a while to fix. Can you speak a little bit about the triage? When you realize you have a problem you have 1,000 PDFs inside your organization, what is the steps that somebody should take to be able to start getting this under control? Because I think most people have started to realize this is going to take a while.
Yeah, so you're right. I think that this did blindside a lot of organizations, right? They might have been thinking about web accessibility or had a partner who was strong in that way working on their website. But then the files, documents, digital documents, which is not just PDFs, but also if you've got Word documents or spreadsheets, PowerPoints, anything
Lots more
like that
stuff.
up on your website, they're all included. We'll probably just talk about PDFs, but we do mean all of those things. The majority of them for most organizations are PDFs. They've been widely shared for years because there's something that anybody can create and just throw up on the website. You don't need to be an IT person. You don't need to be even that website manager, which is why this problem kind of, one, got so big, and two, is so unknown, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody sort of has ownership over that whole library
It's
of
it
documents,
it's
right?
a blind spot for most organizations because we never received training on how to make a PDF so it was accessible. Most of us still probably do not know how to do that correctly. And furthermore, if there's a large collection that goes back years and years and years of all of these documents, et cetera. So what's the first thing that an organization that's got 1,000 PDFs and they realize they've got to start dealing with this, et cetera? We'll talk about why this might have happened a little bit more later on, but what's the first step somebody should do?
Yeah. Well, they need to inventory what those are, right? They need to find them all. We have scanning tools that help to manage that sort of thing, to find all those public facing documents and then start to triage them. First, ask yourself, does it need to be on the website, right?
Mm,
Oftentimes, it's an example I shared with you earlier is an 8-year-old event that happened one time and had a flyer, right?
yeah,
That
the Fourth
flyer
of
is still
July
live on the
parade.
web
Yeah,
and
Fourth of
nobody
July
knows.
parade from 2010, right?
Right. So there's probably a lot across organizations, a lot of documents like that that just don't need to be on the web.
I've heard that you can take some of those and if you archive them, you can still make them sort of available, but
So
you're,
there's specific exceptions that you'd want to read the rules and make sure that you're following in this ruling, this DOJ ruling that is. And just to back up for a quick second, the DOJ ruling is adding a compliance deadline, right? That's what's new in all of this is the
mm,
compliance deadline, which was supposed to be April and is now going to be April of next year.
um,
Okay, so archive documents in the DOJ ruling, there's a specific section about what it means and what is allowable as an exception that can be archived. So
yeah.
archive documents don't have to be remediated, but if
Mm-mm.
you're going to treat them in that way, they have to be something that was published before the deadline, is specifically kept for research and, for example, like just a record keeping document, like a meeting minutes from a meeting 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's record keeping, it's not going to change, and it's not really an active use. If you take that type of document and put it in an archived section of your website, then you might be in compliance if you follow all those rules, if you meet each one of those bullet points, right?
Okay.
Those are documents that don't have to be remediated. But if you have that same meeting minutes, but it's for next month's meeting and or let's say next year's meeting and it's beyond the deadline,
Yeah.
anything that is created after the deadline, regardless of if it's that type of sort of record keeping document, It
Yep.
still has to be
Has to
compliant.
be, it has to be compliant. And so we have documents now, meeting minutes is a great example because they might go back 20 years. And so you can take a large section of them, put them in an archive. Is it have to be labeled that way specifically on your website, or is there something?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a gray area because the ruling itself doesn't say what that means, precisely what an archive section means, right?
Gotcha.
And that's the kind of thing that I think are going to, as this evolves, we're all going to figure out, what does
Sure.
that mean? And it might be defined by lawsuits, or it might be defined by some smart governance moving forward within organizations.
Yeah, sounds like lawsuits might win. There's more money in lawsuits.
All
Um,
right.
all right, so we have done an inventory. When we're looking at that, we can identify documents that could be put into an archive. Now we have left over all the other documents that are active on the website that are going to be widely available. Some are small, some are medium, some are large. Let's talk about a little bit about what are the types of things inside of those documents. This might get into the weeds when we say how many things have to be fixed inside of these documents, and what's easy, what's medium, and what's hard to fix.
Sure. I think before I actually go that far, I'm going to finish the first conversation first, which is these sort of types of documents, right? So
Yeah.
there's going to be documents that can come off the website. There's going to be documents that can be archived.
Yep.
And then hopefully what you're left with is a set of true working documents that are looked at often, necessary for your
Day-to-day operations.
your day-to-day operations, right? And so then you ask yourself, should this be a PDF, right? So an example there is like, I'm a city government and I have a plumbing permit application. Should that be a PDF, or should that just be a form that somebody can fill out on the website,
Yeah.
which is immediately more accessible for lots of reasons, right?
Yeah, turn it into a page. Go ahead.
Can it just be an HTML page? Or if and that's a good example because it's interactive. And interactive PDFs are even more difficult to make accessible than ones that are just,
and they're just from a user experience to interactive PDFs, which are so easy to create and so awful to deal with. There's so many steps involved and so much friction inside there. So from a usability perspective, I'm not a big fan.
Right. And then from a governance perspective, how is the person getting that back to you, right? It's getting emailed back to someone, or it's going to a repository, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if it's an HTML form, you can manage that well.
Lots of friction involved inside there. HTML makes it so much easier. Yep.
Yeah. So another example then would be a PDF document that's regularly referenced, again, maybe it's like instructions for something, right? That same plumbing permit, but it's instructions on how to fill it out. This is a kind of a silly example, but again, great content to move into a web page. Why is that a PDF at all, right? And the answer to that is probably somehow there was less friction in its initial creation for it to be a PDF than a website, but now it makes sense to just make it a website.
Yeah, I know how it happens because the person who authored those instructions for the plumbing permit wrote them in Word. That's where they started. And then Word has a print the PDF and then they send it's all done. It's so much extra effort initially to be able to turn that into a well-structured HTML page. It's probably 5x the expert. And just calling that out, saying that's the reality. That's why it happens, because it's so much easier just to dump it up there as a PDF file. So
because anybody can do it. Not everybody's a web author, but everybody, for the most part, has, to your point, Word on their machine.
Yeah, so they have it. All right, so we've identified different types of documents that are out there and some of the reasons why those might exist. Now, drilling into a document, what are the things inside of the document that make it non-compliant?
So PDFs have a really complicated document architecture and structure underneath, sort of this layer of metadata that the user, no user can see. It's just sort of machine readable. And if you simply export from Word, let's say, without managing any of that, most of it won't be there.
Right.
But if you
things like alt text, things like
if you don't deliberately add alt text to an image isn't going to have alt text. Reading order is a really important one. So this gets more into, let's say I've authored something maybe not in Word, but in say like an InDesign or another graphical kind of a program, right? Where there's a lot of different elements and lots of layers, and authoring tools like that use layers. They don't use reading order. And so you have to go back in and say, this comes first, this comes second, this comes third. Otherwise, that's not going to make any sense to somebody who's not looking at it visually, right?
Yeah, if they're using a screen reader or something, et cetera, that's jumping all over the place. Even to us, humans who have sight, it's difficult if you're jumping around and tabbing through something and it's jumping all over. It's annoying also. So it's got a usability problem on top of that.
So Another example is PDFs that have charts or tables. This is also true on the web. Anything like that needs to have really clear, descriptive alternative text when you're not able to see that graphic, right? So that's another one that, unless you take specific measures to get that alternative text into the document, however that you're authoring it, it's just not going to be in there.
Okay, so we've done an inventory. We've identified stuff that could be archived. We've identified now we have a big pile of PDFs. Some of them have been created with text embedding and using kind of the full power of PDF. Some of them are just images. They're just JPEGs embedded inside of a PDF format. Can those be remediated?
They can. There are good tools. Yeah, those are what we call PDFs that don't have OCR, right? Optical character recognition.
Yes.
So
right.
there's really good tools that can read that text and pull it out and make it live text, right? So there are remediation tools, including Adobe Acrobat, if you have the Pro version, that can do that kind of thing. But those are really good examples of where you ask yourself, if this was created in that way, is it really even something that needs to live on as a PDF?
Yeah, right. That's something else to create over there. All right, so now we've got the scan and we're starting the assessment. And I know that we have built a scanner internally ourselves that can go through and take a look at an entire website and identify which PDFs are in good shape, which ones need some attention, and which ones need a human review. Talk about what are the human review elements that have to be done. And maybe we could show that tool when we're all done over here. So what does human review mean?
Yeah, so, well, the way that our tool works is we do have just sort of a set of characteristics that we chose and we could adapt over time. But it essentially says, look, if this document's big or hard, right? So that means it's either a large file size, it's a large number of pages, it has
hundreds of pages.
It could be hundreds of pages, could be hundreds of images. When our scanner finds a document like that, rather than doing anything automated, it just gets flagged as, hey, let's have a human take a look at this and decide a path forward, right? Because it doesn't make sense to automatically remediate a 150-page document that really you're just going to take off the web.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, which brings up you talked about automation, and we have seen and had discussions with a number of different companies that have magical, we're going to fix all your PDFs for you websites, or we'll fix all your accessibility with just one insert of JavaScript, et cetera. You're smiling. Why are you smiling?
Well, yes. So we've become aware that our clients and our just, people we're talking to in different organizations and governments and whatnot are inundated with these sales pitches where it's one click, we're going to solve all your problems. When you see those emails come in or those landing pages thrown in front of you, they don't list a price. No. And when you dig in a little further, you learn there are tremendous gaps. First, it's very costly. Could be $1 to $2 per page, not per PDF, but per page. So again, that 150-page PDF is 150 times the $1 to $2. And then you also learn immediately that there are big exceptions to what counts as one-click remediated, right?
Yes,
so
right.
We did have a discussion with one of those organizations, and we asked them about the OCR documents that you just mentioned, and they went, oh, no, those don't count, right?
Yeah.
And so immediately you find that the hardest of documents don't count within that sort of ecosystem of what they seem to be selling, right? So it's an unfortunate sort of bait and switch, if you will.
Yeah, it is. And we don't have to beat up on them too much. And everybody's maybe got to discover this on their own. But what a good thing, if you've been sucked in by the siren song of come, we can fix all this for free or for very low cost, et cetera, it might be wise to send them a couple difficult documents and have a frank discussion about what are the actual costs. But in the meantime, we provide this service too. We have a scanner. Why don't you show a little bit more what we do?
Yeah. Well, let me say one thing about that, though, which is we can provide everything that those other organizations provide. We just try not to talk about it in the same way. And so if we talk about it realistically, what can be done really well in an automated fashion, and then we layer on some AI for certain things that require reasoning, is documents that are, for example, those meeting minutes. They're primarily text. Maybe we have to add alt text to a few images. The reading order is already set because it's just, again, primarily a text document. If you have simple documents like that, they're actually very easy to remediate automatically. They may not even need that much fixing. And so when we get back to what we talked about before, as far as you could archive all those meeting minutes, you could, but actually they are great as far as falling into this category of being possible to automatically remediate.
Fix real quickly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's those really big, big documents that continue to come back being
Bigger, complex
the
ones. So
hard
there's lots of
problem.
different criteria. Yeah. Why don't you share your screenshot you showed me before?
Yeah, this is just an example of what our scanner will produce. So for example, this was an organization that had we found 657 PDFs on the website, and the scanner automatically puts them in these categories. So what's valuable about this is it tells us right away, okay, this whole set of green that are categorized as ready they're like what I just described. They're ready for automatic remediation. They're not flagged as being too big or too many images or
Yep.
needing OCR or any of those things that flag us as right away being a thing that we're going to worry about. And then if you look at this, there's the blue that say untagged. Untagged is a document that is live text, but it doesn't have a lot of that structure that I talked about being underlying the PDF, which tells the machine what's going on inside of this and what was the intention of text. Is it a heading? Is it a paragraph? Is it an image? That
They
sort of
need some
thing.
attention. So untagged
Yeah.
ones are going to need some intervention.
Yep. And so tagging is also something that we can do in an automated process. We do use AI for that. So AI can read the document and use its own reasoning to go, this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is an image that
But
needs alt text.
somebody needs to approve that and be able
Yep.
to curate that to make sure it's being done
Yep.
correctly. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why they don't immediately fall into the green. They're in the blue because it says, here's another layer that's a little deeper, and we're going to want to have some extra review on it. And then when you look here at the yellows and the reds, red probably means, hey, this showed up as a path on your website, something linked to it, but there's 404 perhaps. There's not actually a PDF living there
Nothing
anymore.
there. Nobody home.
So that's a really important first step is, okay, well, let's take those bad links off of our website, right?
Yep.
And then the yellows are all those ones that fell into manual review, where immediately they got flagged again for being too big, too many images, something that said, hey, let's take a look at this before we move further. We might determine that one of those is worthy of automated remediation, but we're going to take a pause for a second and then make that determination.
Yeah. So when we're using AI to some degree to be able to scan and assess, and we've spent probably 6 months developing, you can't automatically do everything in AI in 5 minutes. So this has been a pretty long effort, et cetera, to build out these tools, to build out the scanner. This is available now. And in addition, once you remediate some of these files on the side, we can create an output set of files. Is that correct? That then can be re-imported into whatever content management system wherever you're hosting your website. If you have Titan, we actually can insert them in, a little plug for Titan, but if you have Titan, we can insert them automatically right back into where they came from. But it's probably true with WordPress and other sites too.
Yeah, I mean, what is nice about Titan, it is an important plug because we're doing it, it's just sort of a one shot, they're all back in there. Whereas in another content management, you might find yourself having to do them one by one, which if it's 657 files is a big task in and of itself.
Yeah. Okay, going back, I just want to touch in our closing minutes here on the origin of the problem here, which is that lots of tools, people are not trained. This is not in their wheelhouse, but certainly extra effort that has to be done when you're creating documents in the first place, PDFs, which often start in Word or some other tool like that where the PDF is generated automatically. Bring up the Word thing that we have. You had a document where we can take a look at the tools that are built into Word that allow you to do this. And one of the other things we do is we provide training and consulting to any organization on getting your people up to speed on how to create accessible things in the first place so that you don't have to end up remediating them when you're done.
Yeah, so the majority of authoring tools like Word, and earlier I mentioned InDesign, or you might be working in any number of authoring tools, any, I'll say, good one is going to have a step like this one where you can go into the review pane and check accessibility. And it's going to open this pane over here for you that is kind of a wizard walking you through some of the things that you need to do as the author to make sure they're in place, right? So right away, this is, and we've curated this to have some errors that we can now fix, right? It shows me that it's missing alt text. So it'll bring me down here, show me the image that's missing alt text, and then give me some options. This now more recently has an option to generate a description via AI. Again, that's something you're definitely going to want to make sure is good, right? It makes sense for the image and is descriptive and accurate in the context of your document itself.
Sure.
Or you can write your own description. And then if there were multiple images, this is going to allow you to move from one to the next.
Yep.
And then Another thing, just real quick, we've seen here is table headers. This is another one that is a complicated in any form as far as becoming machine readable, making sure that you have the structure in place so that it's machine readable, even if it's on a website, with the most simple part being, does it have a header for each of your columns in your table?
Yeah.
And this is going to give you some quick options of, yeah, I put my first set of things in the first row, but I didn't make them an actual header. So go ahead and do that, right? And it's just going to clean up in the back end. And once you've selected all these and fixed them, then you're closer to being ready for publication as far as meeting some of those accessibility steps.
Okay. Cool tool built right into Word. And if your organization's paying attention to it, you can use this right at the get-go. Otherwise, if somebody has meeting minutes, we remediate it, fix it, and then some administrator someplace updates the meeting minutes and republishes it, and boom, you're right back where you started from. It's not compliant anymore.
Can I speak for a quick second about the full picture of what an
Sure.
organization needs to look at? So we've talked a bit about the remediation, right? So you've got this pile of documents that are historic, but the really big thing, or another thing that sits just right alongside that, that organizations need to be thinking about right now, is every document that's created from now forward, right? So we just touched on, those Word documents. Essentially, as an organization, your biggest task will be coming up with a set of templates that are shared across your organization that have some of this accessibility built into them, right? Each time a person authors it, they're not starting from scratch, or if they're not thinking about it, a lot of that's already in there, and you're taking less of the burden off of every single person every single time.
Yeah.
And then you're doing training so that they do know how to publish in a way that is accessible. And then the next piece that you would need is ongoing monitoring. Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can supply as well for websites and for documents on websites. And that's to say, every month, every quarter, as you see, we can take a look at it again, scan again, and see if anything's popped up that wasn't there before.
Yeah, this is something that's not done. It's not a one and done problem. This is an ongoing thing you have to pay attention to. And all right, Sid, I think we've hit enough for 1 day's worth of PDF accessibility remediation. Thanks everybody for watching, and stay tuned. We got more of these things coming. Around the Campfire. Thanks for joining me around the campfire.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, bye.